Today on Top of Mind, we're talking to coding instructor Michelle Brush. Michelle will talk to us about the importance of learning a coding language in this growing digital economy, even if it's just to talk to your developer. I'm guest host Annette Beck, and this is Top of Mind. Well, welcome, Michelle, to Top of Mind, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about your interest in teaching coding classes here in Kansas City. You work at Cerner, and you do this for a living, but you've also volunteered to do it here in the startup community to get more people exposed to what coding really means to a startup. So can you tell us first about a little bit about your work at Cerner?
Yeah. I work at Cerner as a senior software architect, which that title typically means that you design the software and you look at the big picture and figure out how all the pieces should fit together. But I found a while ago that talent development and growing the next group of leading software engineers was a bigger problem for me to solve than a particular single software system. So I shifted my focus and I work on their training programs for software engineers, all the way from when they first come in the door, learning to make that transition from college into a corporate environment, to after you've been on the job for 2 years and you want to take the next level and kind of take a leadership role, we have another training program that we put you through to help with that transition. So when I looked at something like Kauffman Labs, I thought, well, isn't it great to even groom them earlier and get them interested in programming as early as possible? Problems like this we routinely debate on a daily basis. No one has the right answer.
One of the things we were hearing from the startup community a lot was there's just not enough coders available to us. So the decision that we made here was let's try to bring more people in, host some introductory classes, and see whether or not we have impact. So what are you hearing as part of your Java classes here at the foundation?
Yeah, I think programming is one of those things where it could be very difficult for someone and then suddenly just clicks. And that's what I saw a lot in teaching this class, is that the individuals would be struggling and thinking, getting less confident, thinking maybe it wasn't for them, and then something would just click. Sadly, it's a lot like my 4-year-old is learning to read right now, and he's just there, he's almost there, and you're just waiting for that moment for it all to click, and teaching's a lot like that.
So if I have never taken any coding classes, which actually I have because I was a coder, but if I've never taken any before and I just want to learn what it's about so I can learn the vernacular and be more able to talk to the people that I'm working with, how do I know what language to take? What would you suggest is the best way for me to get started?
I personally and strongly believe that to be successful, the way that we're kind of cultured to think about computers nowadays, you need a lot of immediate visual wins. Like, you need to be able to see your code working very rapidly to feel better about what you're doing. So oddly enough, I taught Java, and I think that's one of the worst languages to learn as your first language, because it's very much all text in the beginning. You can definitely do great things with it, of course you can, but it takes a while to get to the point where you get to see something very visual, very responsive. So in that sense, I really think that a good first programming language is something like JavaScript, because although it's kind of complicated and a little weird, when you get it, you get that nice kind of reward of seeing your stuff working very quickly.
There's a wide variety of ages of people that come to the classes here at Kauffman Labs. So do you have a feel for when's a better time to learn? Is it better to learn when they're in the grade school age or high school age, or is it okay for somebody in their 40s to say, I need to learn more about this?
If I had my way, we would teach programming at a very young age before middle school. I think if we wait till middle school, we've almost waited a little too long to get people interested. Around that time is kind of when we're setting our ideas of how we see ourselves as adults. And so if the objective is getting more and more people interested, then I would love to shoot for that 4th grade, 5th grade level. And there's been a lot of great work recently with creating what I call visual programming languages as a way of getting through to those kids. And so they have an iPad and they're just dragging and dropping all of the structures onto the iPad, and it's very colorful and very responsive, and it's a way of getting them interested in the idea, so maybe they come back later and they actually are willing to invest in learning it the harder way.
So there are tons of different programming languages. Can you speak to the complexity of the different languages and which ones you can progress from to another?
I have a lot of experience in this because I run a meetup called Girl Develop It, and we're trying to bring more women into the field, kind of my opinion selfishly so I can get more people to hire. But the idea is that you start with something that's really kind of basic and simple like HTML. And that gets you to understand some concepts about structuring, about understanding how code looks and how it feels. And then you add some CSS. And CSS is a presentation language, is how you should think of it. And it's basically describing how you want data to be displayed. So immediately you're getting to see how you change something about the code and you get this feedback on how it all works. And then you can move on to JavaScript, and that kind of gives you the ability to make a fully functional front end for website, and you can have buttons and do animations and do different interactions. And so once you get there, though, to do full-scale web development, a lot of times you kind of have to make a choice of what's going to be on the other end of things. So we're used to working with the code that runs in the browser, the web page itself, but on the back end, on the other side, is all the logic and all the databases and all the big, heavy stuff. And when you're ready for that, that's usually when you move to a more, use the word complicated, and maybe that's the right word for it, a more complicated language like Java. You can do back-end services in C++, which is a very complicated, very nitty-gritty language that you can use. Now, on the other hand, they've developed all sorts of frameworks that allow you to kind of do everything with one language, and that's getting a lot of appeal right now. So what you're seeing is a growth in Ruby and in Python, not so much because the languages, although that contributes that the languages are well designed, but also that there's these frameworks that allow you to get an entire website up and running very quickly, front end to back end. You probably still have to play with a little bit of HTML, you'll have to play with a little bit of CSS, and maybe a little bit of JavaScript, but you can do the bulk of the work in one language, and that makes it very powerful and very convenient as a language to interact with. So if someone's looking into getting into full-scale website development and not just trying to get their feet wet thinking, is this language for me, then I would strongly recommend something like Ruby or Python.
If I'm a startup, I think I'm not a techie, and so I don't need to know how to code. I don't need to know very much about the technology end of it. I'll just hire somebody to do it. So what would you suggest to me as the minimum knowledge that I need to possess in order to be able to negotiate contracts, to find the right programmer to hire or to contract through?
This is really hard because what's happened in the industry is there's been this sort of explosion of buzzwords on resumes. And whether you're hiring via a consultant, a contractor, or a direct hire to your company, you're going to have to weed through and figure out, okay, what is the real meat in this resume, in this candidate, versus what is just something that they've only kind of touched on or read about or heard about. And that is really hard to do if you're not kind of immersed in the tech world. Now, I'm not saying you have to be an expert in everything. I am perfectly capable of interviewing candidates and grilling them, sometimes on technologies I've never touched in my life, because I know enough about what's in the air and blogs that people are writing and what people are tweeting about to kind of get a good idea of what questions I should ask. And so I think for me, I would say first and foremost is, learn one or two programming languages that are related to whatever it is you're trying to build. So, if you're going to build an Android system, then you probably should, take a Java class and kind of figure out what Java looks like and what to look for in that. If you're going to build a website, take a Ruby or a JavaScript class. And then you want to be following a lot of blogs and keeping an eye on conferences and just kind of build up your vocabulary so that when someone does come to you, you can at least ask what I call the right stupid question. And just kind of build up your vocabulary so that when someone does come to you, you can at least ask what I call the right stupid question. And this is one of the things I love to do when I'm interviewing, is that if I don't know a technology, I might ask someone a stupid question about it, and hoping that if they know it well enough, they can at least explain it to me and I can understand it. But if you can't answer my stupid question, or you can't explain it to me in a way that I understand it, I suspect that you don't really know it either. And so that's one of the tricks I do.
Thank you for that. Thank you for being here to talk to us today on Top of Mind.
Yeah, thank
you. And special thanks for the work that you do with Kauffman Labs and helping the startups here in the Kansas City area.
Yeah.
So, great.
All right.